We're going to get started with Rosh Hashanah. And I don't know if any of you have had this moment yet, but every year I have several of these points where I'm like, Rosh Hashanah, oh, that is X weeks away. And then I kind of like give myself a pat on the back and a sigh of relief that I don't yet have to panic. But then there's another point closer to Rosh Hashanah, which I've now had a few of, where I'm like, oh my goodness, Rosh Hashanah is now X days away, and now we're at that point where it's like a week and a couple of days. It's not a joke anymore. It's really coming. And, we call these the days of awe, where they are meant to inspire that feeling in us. It's very serious. One of my teachers in yeshiva he was a principal of a school in Brooklyn. He's basically a really amazing example of like the Orthodox world in Brooklyn, like the modern Orthodox world in Brooklyn from my parents' generation. And he said when he was growing up in yeshiva in Brooklyn, he said, if it was Elul, which is this month we're in right now, I'm doing this work we're doing right now of like getting ready for Shon Yom Kippur. He said, if it was Elul and you weren't crying in your introspection, in your inner work that you were doing as part of getting ready for this time, he said people thought there was something wrong with you because that was what was required. That was like the cultural norm in that milieu. So hopefully, I mean, you can cry if you want to. It's not mandatory. People don't get ejected from the Zoom for not crying, but hopefully there'll be some worthwhile work that we're going to share together. See a few more folks have joined us. So really welcome to everyone. So good to have you with us. Also welcome to anyone joining via the recording. I'm going to share my screen and we will begin with Rosh Hashanah. First section is called Judging Kindly, because as you may know, Rosh Hashanah, one of the primary names for it in our liturgy is Yom Hadin, din being judgment. So judgment is a major theme. So we're going to begin with a very, very early mystical text. Some call it Kabbalistic, but it's before what today's academics call Kabbalistic. So I call it Proto-Kabbalah, Sefer Yetzirah, our oldest mystical text actually that we have in Judaism, unless you count the Bible, of course, the Tanakh, which is a mystical text in certain respects. And one of the things Sefer Yetzirah does, it's a very, very unique text. It reads like no other text. And one of the things it does is it tells us that every month has a unique quality or faculty or something that people do that we need to pay attention to and potentially heal in this month if we do pay attention to it. And it also has a letter of the Aleph Bet, a Hebrew letter associated with it, and a constellation. We're going to see a little bit about this month we're going into of Tishrei, not the current month, but the month of Rosh Hashanah begins. So this refers to God, the creator, he made the letter Lamed, that's the letter of Tishrei, Lamed, king over coition, or it's a fancy word for sex. So that's the human faculty or activity of Tishrei, which is so fascinating because you might think, well, the high holy days are not maybe a time when Judaism and the rabbis were imagining people really focusing on their sexual life, but actually the month, from a spiritual, mystical perspective, it's one of the very deep themes of the month. It's creativity and union in the deepest sense. And carrying on, he bound a crown to it. He combined one with another. So it says those lines are the same for every month. It's talking about the way that the creator works with space and time and being to create something according to this mystical cosmology, really. It's a cosmology. It's a way of seeing the universe. If anyone's curious about Sefer Yetzirah, there's the Aryeh Kaplan version I've quoted here, which is very scholarly and quotes every rabbinic source ever. But then there's the Rabbi Jill Hammer version, which is much more recent, which really presents it very powerfully and beautifully as a meditation manual and a spiritual work. It's really phenomenal, very accessible too, if anyone's interested. And with them, he formed Libra in the universe. So Libra, that is our constellation of the coming month of Tishrei. The astrology, the zodiac referred to in Sefer Yetzirah is the same one that Western astrology refers to. It's the same thing. So you'll see the synergy. Now in Hebrew, Libra is Moznaim, which I'm highlighting there in the Hebrew, which is scales, meaning like the scales of justice that things are balanced on. When you're weighing up something in a shop to give someone, like spice or a herb or something, you weigh some of this against some of that. So those scales of justice or weighing something out fairly with the two things here, that's Moznaim, related to the root The root is related to balance. It's also actually interestingly related to ear because our balance is in our ear. Tishrei in the year, and the gallbladder in the soul, male and female. So we're going to look at a little bit at this theme of judgment, but I want us to bear in mind, especially the themes of balance and also of creativity, as I mentioned. There's other connections too, but I think those are the main ones to bear in mind. Something from the Zohar about Rosh Hashanah now. Zohar is what academics agree is Kabbalah. It's actually the foundational main text of Kabbalah. And it really becomes the foundation for the whole Hasidic movement. Later, a few centuries later, they draw a great deal on the Zohar. So the Zohar says here, Pesach is the right arm, Abraham, Chesed, and Rosh Hashanah is the left arm, Isaac, Din. Din is judgment, which I mentioned before, and Chesed is loving kindness or loving oneness. So the Zohar is telling us that the festivals of the year and the calendar, in particular, these highlight points, these particularly salient, energetic points of Pesach, which is loving kindness. We were taken out of Egypt with loving kindness. The story the rabbis tell is that we didn't deserve it, but it happened because of an act of generosity being done to us. Whereas Rosh Hashanah is the left arm on the tree of life, on the Kabbalistic diagram of the Sefirot, the qualities of the tree of life, which maps onto the human body, onto the left arm. So the right arm is Chesed, left arm is judgment, Din, severity, Gevurah, it's also called, and that relates to Rosh Hashanah. So here the rabbis are telling us that it's this day of judgment that we have. It's not just a kind of administrative or bureaucratic day of judgment. It's not, it's not just a court date. It's the spiritual mood, it's the spiritual energy of the time that's calling us into that. And the tree of life for the Kabbalists that they're referring to here, the map of the Sefirot, the map of the different qualities, that's a map of reality for them. It's also a map of an individual human because we are a microcosm of reality. It's also a map of the divine because we are made in the image of God. It's a map of everything in between us, God, and the universe. So in whichever level of existence you want to look at, you will find a right hand which is connected to loving kindness, and a left hand connected to severity, judgment, and din, and hence, and Rosh Hashanah in time is the headquarters of that, you might say. We look at an early rabbinic text here. The Mishnah is the first layer of rabbinic code. It's a text from around the time between 0 and 200, say, CE, between 0 and 200 after 0. And it tells us some very, very important information, which becomes foundational for what we do on Rosh Hashanah and with Rosh Hashanah. At 4 times it says the world is judged. On Pesach, for the crops. So Pesach, there is a judgment for one particular thing, for the crops. On Shavuot, there's a judgment for fruits of the tree. On Rosh Hashanah, this is the big one, all the inhabitants of the world pass before him, the divine, like sheep, as it says, he that fashions all of their hearts, that considers all their deeds. And on Sukkot, they are judged for water. So we know, we'll get to Sukkot later. If you're familiar with Sukkot, you know it has a lot of water themes. So there's a judgment that happens on Sukkot about water. Pesach, as we said, crops, Shavuot, fruits of the tree. But Rosh Hashanah, everybody in the world is judged. Right? That's, as I said, kind of the headquarters of this quality of judgment. And we'll see one more source related to this, and then we're going to step back and get a bigger perspective on what this all means. So this from the Talmud, developing that theme of judgment on Rosh Hashanah. And this is a famous source. Even if you haven't seen this exact wording, this exact, this exact text, you may have come across this idea in the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah. So Rav Krospedai said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, 3 books are opened on Rosh Hashanah. One of totally evil people, one of completely righteous people, and one that includes people with both good and bad deeds, Beinonim, intermediate people, the people in the middle. That's you and me. That's 99.99% of people. That's basically everyone. The completely righteous individuals are written and sealed immediately for life. The totally wicked individuals are written and sealed immediately for death. The sentence for the individuals with both good and bad deeds is suspended from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. If they merit, they are inscribed for life. If they do not merit, they are inscribed for death. Hence, some of you may know Leonard Cohen's famous song based on the prayer that Unitana Tokef, who by fire. It's all based on this idea, like who's going to live and who's going to die, right? And this is the ancient rabbinic scaffolding behind those prayers and those ideas. Let's do a little bit more insight on the text, and then we'll come together and hear comments and questions. I wanna complexify the picture a little bit more before we even react, because there's so much more to it. But there's a couple of pieces that are essential, really. So one is this midrash, and this midrash is very representative of many other sources. It tells us something very, very important about all this judgment, because you might be feeling, gosh, there's a judgment, who will live and who will die. This is very heavy, right? That's a very natural way to feel, talking about everything we've talked about so far. But the Midrash here says, what nation is like this nation that knows the nature of her God? Usually, when a person must appear before the court, they wear black clothing, cover themselves in black, let their hair grow and nails grow, so they do not know the outcome of the judgment. Meaning, if we're really scared of a severe judgment, that is how we would act, at least in the ancient world. That's what it's describing. But not so Israel, who wear white clothing. That's on Rosh Hashanah, we wear white. Wrap themselves in white, cut their hair and nails, and eat and drink and rejoice on Rosh Hashanah, knowing that the Blessed Holy One does miracles for them and produces a favorable judgment for them, tearing up their harsh decree of judgment. So if you've ever been at a Rosh Hashanah meal, you know this is true. We have happy meals on Rosh Hashanah, right? And how does that fit with this idea that there's this very severe, life-threatening judgment happening? Well, the Midrash wants to say, this is something about us that we have confidence in the Blessed Holy One doing a miracle for us. I really like that, because it's not actually saying we deserve it, right? It's not saying we have such confidence in ourselves. It's not, right? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say we know that we're perfect, therefore we are partying. It says we are confident in Hashem doing us this miracle and therefore giving us a favorable judgment. It's a miracle, right? It's acknowledging that we need that miracle. Let's see something else really interesting. Now, we're actually going to jump back in time. I didn't go strictly chronologically with this, because I wanted to present it in order that would be maybe most surprising, but hopefully most fitting. This is from the Tanakh, our Bible. The prophet, actually not prophet, but a special person, Nehemiah, a leader of our people. And what the context is here is that the people were exiled to Babylon when the first temple was destroyed in the 500s BCE. So 500 and something before zero. The first temple is destroyed and the people are exiled to Babylon. And then Ezra and Nehemiah are two of the leaders of the people who bring them back, who lead the people back to Jerusalem and start rebuilding Jerusalem. And this is what happens with these people who have been brought back from Babylon. And it's incredible, because they've only been in exile 70 years. It was a very short exile. But in that, according to the text of the Bible, in that 70 years, they've managed to forget all of Torah and to assimilate to a massive extent, to the point where it seems a very large number of them are married to people that they met in Babylon and not to Jewish people. So this is what happens. On the first day of the 7th month, that's Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the 7th month, Ezra, the priest, brought the Torah before the congregation, men and women and all who could listen with understanding. Nehemiah, the Tirshata, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who were explaining to the people, said to all the people, "This day is holy to Hashem, your God. You must not mourn or weep." For all the people were weeping as they listened to the words of the Torah. I have to imagine this. They've apparently, according to the text, and with the commentaries explaining this too, but it's pretty clear from the text, they hadn't had any contact with the Torah for 70 years. Imagine, it's actually interesting if you think about, our own experience wherever you are in the world. Many of you are in America, but wherever you are, if you think about your own story of like your family and like coming from Eastern Europe, if indeed that's your story. I know it is for many of us, not everyone, but wherever your family came from before they are where they are now, did they keep their traditions? Did they forget the traditions? Did they keep their contact with Torah? Did they, did it fade over the generations? Did it strengthen? Are we doing the work of re-embracing it? These people hadn't heard Torah, and no one in their family had for 70 years. And therefore, when the Torah was read, they start mourning and weeping. And Ezra and Nehemiah are saying, no, 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 no. This day is holy to Hashem your God. You must not mourn or weep. It's not that kind of a day. He further said to them, go, eat choice foods and drink sweet drinks, and send portions to whoever has nothing prepared. For the day is holy to our Lord. Do not be sad, for your rejoicing in Hashem is the source of your strength. Then all the people went to eat and drink and send portions and make great rejoicing, for they understood the things they were told. So when we think about eating and drinking and making merry and sending portions, you might think of Purim. That's a festival where still to this day, we actually practice like that. That's what we do on Purim. We feast, we drink sweet drinks, we send portions to one another. Purim is very important and serious in a certain way, but it's also clearly the most chaotic, carnivalistic, hedonistic day of our calendar. Rosh Hashanah, for most of us these days, is not like that, right? I mentioned before, we have a nice festive Rosh Hashanah meal, but there's an air of seriousness still to it for most of us. There's a lot of contradictory enemies. There's a lot of contradictory energies with the day, which is what I'm trying to set the scene with all these sources. We can see just a little bit more from text, and then we'll come back together and process it. There's just a little bit more. This next one actually really nicely sums a lot of it up for us. This is the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch from the 1600s. And its job is to tell us really the bottom line. It's never the final bottom line, but it was at its time, to tell us the bottom line of Jewish practice. When we talk about halakha, Jewish law, what we're really talking about is, what do people actually do? So he tells us, we eat, drink, and rejoice, and we do not fast on Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat Shuvah. Shabbat Shuvah is the Shabbat after Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Fasting is something that people used to like to do a lot to get closer to God. So it was very natural for a lot of people to think, well, if this whole Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur thing is so important, I better fast. And he's saying, no, on Rosh Hashanah and also on the Shabbat next to it, we eat, drink, and rejoice. We do not fast. However, he says, this is where we get with these contradictory energies coming in. However, he says, we should not eat I can never say this word, satiety, I think, in order that we should not become lightheaded. The awe of God should be upon our faces. So eat and drink and rejoice, but don't drink and don't eat to the point where you actually have really fully had enough, because then you might get lightheaded. The awe of God should be upon our faces. So much going on, right? There's so much. We've seen the Ezra and Nehemiah telling the people, your rejoicing in Hashem is a source of your strength. And send portions to each other. That's an ancient biblical text. But Code of Jewish Law says, sure, eat and drink and rejoice. But don't be like completely full and lightheaded. There's an awe that remains. There's almost something paradoxical here. That's why this section is about balance. This is from a great Kabbalist called the Ramban, not to be confused with Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Nachman. Nachmanides. This is from his commentary on the Torah that's very influential. He says Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment in compassion, and Yom Kippur is a day of compassion in judgment, meaning both these very important days are actually dealing with the balance of these different qualities in different days. I think we've seen so much text-wise. I'm tempted to pause there. I'm also tempted to see that we don't have too much left. No, we should pause there. We should. Okay. There's more to see, but I want to also hear responses, insights, and questions. We saw so much already, and then we'll finish the section after that. So does anyone have anything you want to ask or share about any of those sources?
Just
please raise.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, who's speaking?
Oh, it's Tali. I'm sorry.
Hi, Tali.
Hi, I'm actually in a classroom, just my Kabbalah class. I just finished up staying here and doing your class. I just was taken by, it's the first time of hearing having judgment and compassion and judgment. And I think that really is the crux of what the holiday is, but I've never seen it so simply but eloquently stated. So I want to thank you so much for sharing that, because it really says how our sages really helped us really say in a very clear but powerful way how to view those both holidays. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Let's see who else has got their hand raised. Tiferet, please.
Good morning. Thank you. I actually was struck by the irony of a couple of examples here. And I think I'm currently really reading things through a lens of what's the propaganda? So one of the references you gave is this wearing white. And if we were afraid, we would wear black. But we're wearing white because we're rehearsing our death. We're wearing what we will wear when we're put into the ground. So to me, that's kind of a twist this author's changing, at least presenting something that I don't know how much it's supported in what we do. And the second one that struck me was when people came back after 70 years in Babylonia and they didn't know anything about Torah, but yet that's where the Talmud came from, the Babylonian Talmud. So obviously people were, so I don't know, I'm just thinking, I really am seeing it through kind of what's going on now globally. And it's like, oh my goodness, like we all just kind of pick and choose whatever we want to choose to highlight a point. And maybe it's got its own, well, everything has its own agenda, but I don't know. I'm just struck by the irony, and I was kind of laughing. That sounds disrespectful. I don't want to be disrespectful, but with yet another intense event and historical upheaval here, my perception is pretty skewed at the moment too.
Tiferet, thank you. I hear you. I'm gonna actually push back on the things you said from a factual point of view, but I think the impulse to critically question and look for the propaganda is not a terrible one. So the first one was about wearing white. I was going to say we do wear white on Shabbat as well, right? And that's not about religion. And on Yom Kippur, thanks for that. And what I wanted to say was, I think Yom Kippur is generally seen in the tradition as rehearsing death, but Rosh Hashanah is actually more connected to our birth, interestingly. So I think you're right. The white is connected to a kind of simplicity and a kind of elemental existence, as opposed to the usual persona we walk around in the world. But it's not only death. I want to say I really think that birth theme is stronger than death. I really feel like there's so much in Rosh Hashanah about birth. Actually, we'll see some of it in this session, hopefully. And then so much in Yom Kippur about death, and it's like the two sides of the coin. And about the Talmud, yes, but that happens later. So at the time, the people are in Babylon for the exile, at least according to this text, and this is a biblical text. We can believe it or not believe it. We can do whatever we want with it. But they really lose touch. But the Babylonian Talmud isn't developed till much later. So that you're right though, that the fact is we might have somebody might make the assumption of like, that place is not a place of holiness, of Torah, that's not a place where Torah will develop. And that was clearly disproven by the fact that Talmud did develop there. And even before that, Ezekiel had his great prophecy there of the chariot, which is held by the mystics to be the highest prophecy out of any of the prophecies. So you're not wrong to probe and question and push back on that impulse. So thank you. Let's hear from everyone who has their hand up, and then I'm going to say after the folks with their hands up now already, let's cut back to the sources. Rena, please.
Thank you. I'm stuck maybe in judgment and compassion and judgment, because I mean, I'm getting clearer about it as I'm thinking about it. To use different words, and the words you brought up earlier, would Rosh Hashanah be chesed, but needing gevura to give it a kind of container, and Yom Kippur is gevura, but needs chesed to soften the boundaries? Is that using different words? Earlier you were referencing the Sefirot as Rosh Hashanah's sort of head task.
I think what you just said works very well. And I also want to say, I think the Kabbalistic texts are very slightly inconsistent or varied about exactly the phrasing here. And I think the reason for that is the texts we have in our mystical tradition reflect people's inner experience. So if what you just said resonates with your inner experience of it, it's certainly faithful to the tradition. I would say everyone might put it a little bit differently. Like for example, on the Tree of Life, you mentioned Chesed. So some people really emphasize the relationship between Chesed, loving kindness, and Din, Gevurah, judgment. But some Kabbalists really emphasize the combination of them both, which is into Tiferet, which is also called compassion or Rachamim. It's just a difference in exactly what each one of us experiences and therefore emphasizes. But certainly what you said, I wouldn't push back on at all. I think it's very much consistent with what the tradition says.
So just to follow up, the lead Rosh Hashanah is leading with compassion and Yom Kippur with judgment. Is that fair? And the other quality comes in.
See, that's where it gets tricky for me because I tend to feel that the theme of judgment is dominant for Rosh Hashanah, but maybe that's just my inherited experience of it. And then the compassion comes in a kind of more subtle way. But that's my experience of it. But I think these sources are telling us something is going on there that is not simple, and that everyone's going to experience a little bit differently.
Okay, and just one other real quick thing. When you said Passover is about crops, but in Rosh Hashanah we're using apples. I know that's probably traditional pop culture, but that seems to me to be about crops and the good harvest and the bounty.
Right. So that tradition of using an apple is mentioned in rabbinic sources. But I'm just thinking, I don't remember seeing it in very old ones, meaning I think that's a more recent tradition. So I wouldn't ascribe as much weight to that as the other things we're talking about, which are more foundational. They just go back further. Thank you. Let's hear from the other folks with hands. Ayala, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that I was so resonated with the piece from Nehemiah. Is that how you say his name?
Nachmanides?
The piece about.
Oh, sorry, Nehemiah. Sorry.
Yeah, Nehemiah. Thank you. Because I feel like that's my own personal experience. My grandparents came from Orthodox religious backgrounds in Eastern Europe, came to America, and everything fell away. And then when I was growing up, Judaism was talked about, it was important, but the holidays were just about food and coming together. And it wasn't until I came to Israel in the mid-70s that I actually experienced Shabbat or learning Torah, because I went to a yeshiva for a few months. And then in the mid-90s in the States, I encountered renewal Judaism, and it was on the Chagim, the high holidays, and I wept the entire time because it was like I felt like I finally came home to a place I was longing for, but I didn't know what I was longing for. And so I just so related to that, and what it means to be deprived of something for so many years and then to finally have it accessible. Yeah. Tibauti. You're muted.
It was good because I didn't interrupt you. I said thank you. That's really touching. Thank you very much for sharing that. Wow. Hina, please.
Quickly, question. I had not heard about wearing white on Rosh Hashanah, only on Yom Kippur. I have seen leaders of services wearing white on Rosh Hashanah, but I had not seen it as a practice among the community, and if you could comment on that. And my second question has to do with something on the first page. In the Zohar 3:283a, Pesach is the right arm, Abraham Chesed, etc. You said this day of judgment is not an administrative courthouse. Rather, and you described it something else, and I wonder if you could repeat what those words were, if you remember more or less.
Sure, I said that it was not just, maybe there is this administrative courthouse too, I don't know, but it's not just that, I may have said it's energetic, it's spiritual, that this is the headquarters in time in our calendar of this experience, the spiritual experience of judgment, and us meeting this this force, this energy of din, of judgment.
Thank you.
And about the practice of wearing white, it's there, and this is an old midrash, and it's there as a practice. I believe it's codified in sources like the Shulchan Aruch, although I'm not certain of that, but I believe it is. So maybe there are many things though which were practiced once upon a time, and yet didn't translate to 20th or 21st century America, or wherever else in the world we are. So maybe it was too much for folks. Maybe it was a little bit weird. Maybe it didn't fit with American life or with American religion, to do that the whole time. I'm not sure.
Do other people have that experience? Can you like raise your hand if they do white in your synagogue on let's say on Yom Kippur? And what about on Rosh Hashanah? Interesting. And what about wearing of leather? I'm asking you this, Daniel. Rosh Hashanah.
Wearing leather?
Yeah, we don't wear that.
Yeah, wearing leather's totally fine. Because the reason we don't wear leather on Yom Kippur is we're connected to fasting, actually. It's one of the ways we afflict ourselves is we don't wear leather shoes. It's one of the ancient ways.
It's the afflictions. We don't afflict on Rosh Hashanah. Thank you.
Exactly. Right, exactly. No affliction. Right. Which again is not so obvious. That's why the Code of Jewish Law had to come and say, don't fast. Because people thought they should. So yeah, it's a balance. Thank you. Well, let's hear from Luz and then Chana Bracha. Luz, please.
So, oh my God, I have so many. Well, I'm going to choose two things to talk about. One thing that really struck me was this idea of the awe of God that should show in our face, so that that's why we shouldn't like eat, right, till we're satiated. And I was thinking about my like unhealthy relationship with food, and how I'm trying to like overcome that addiction, and how like that addiction, as like many addictions, are just a way to escape the world. So it made me think of like it's demanding us to like stay present, right? Like you shall not like overindulge to the point where it's like a sin, right?
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to ask, when we're counting the Omer from when we're giving the Torah, right, during Pes, and we're counting 49 days, what's the holiday when we're giving the
between Pesach and Shavuot?
right? So is there a relationship? Because when we're counting 41 days, there's like an introspection of like the 7 Sefirot, right? And it's like Chesed of Gevurah, Chesed of Tiferet, Chesed of it. So is there a relationship between like Chesed of Gevurah being Rosh Hashanah, and then Gevurah of Chesed, like that being kind of like the middle of the Omer, being Yom Kippur, or is that I'm just reading way too much into it?
Okay, so they are using the same system of the Tree of Life. First of all, what you said about food, I totally resonate with and agree with. They are both these practices are using the Sefirot, the Tree of Life, as their kind of map of reality. I don't know if there's a one-to-one correlation, but you're correct to kind of like see the resonance there. Pesach is exactly opposite Sukkot in the calendar. Like they are both the full moons closest to the equinoxes, spring equinox, autumn equinox. So like there is something going on there. And also there's something the Kabbalists do. They map the Tree of Life onto the 10 days, because there are 10 Sefirot in the Tree of Life. There's these 10 qualities of divine. They map them onto the 10 days from beginning with the first day of Rosh Hashanah, ending with Yom Kippur, the first 10 days of the month. There are actually a few different systems, or at least two, of like, which way to do it, up and top to bottom and bottom to top. Of course, Jews can't agree on these things. But it's the same system, and so yeah, they are tapping into the same thing you're talking about. Thank
Can I
you.
say, can I say one more quick thing?
Please.
Not just like something curious that I noticed
Mhm.
that when my parents married, they married actually in Rosh Hashanah,
Mhm.
and this year's anniversary is also falling in Rosh Hashanah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Chana Bracha, please.
Hi, I was going to say I'm piggybacking, but I can't say that because it's not kosher. So maybe I'm doggy backing. I don't know on Ayala and everybody else. The similar experience with the families who forgot everything. But somehow in the body, in the cellular level, when we come back, when we just rediscover it, it's like we always knew it, which is very startling. It says something I never understood about genetics. One of the things I want to say a comment about food to Luz and to everybody, especially myself. I have always thought Jews have a very fraught relationship with food because of the Exodus. 40 years in the desert with manna. Hey, I live alone. You can't see light in my refrigerator. I have so much. When I see light, I panic. And when I don't feel well, which I've had a lot of that, I want to eat, even though to comfort me. So I think there's a very ancient relationship with food, which isn't exactly addiction. It has to do with affliction, perhaps more than that. And the third thing I want to say is I've been dipping into classes about Zohar and Kabbalah and the feminine. Well, I think the Tiferet and the Rachamim in these holidays is bringing the feminine face of God there too. And I don't know what you have to say about that. So that's it.
Chana Bracha, thank you. So Tiferet Rachamim, this quality, it's the heart chakra or the heart sephira in the tree of life. Compassion or truth or beauty or harmony. Also truth, as I said. The Kabbalists see it as a masculine quality, but they call it rachamim, which means womb compassion. And generally wombs are not something the masculine really knows how to embody. So there's something going on there. And there's a reason why the major theme of Kabbalah is the unification of Tiferet with existence, Shekhinah, Malchut, manifestation, which is feminine. So there's something there in on its own, it's not complete. This supposedly masculine quality on its own is not complete. It needs to be brought into intercourse with the feminine to be complete. Okay, I'm gonna carry on. I'm gonna go back to the sheet and carry on because otherwise we won't carry on. You won't get there. So I'm sorry, that's what we're gonna do. So if there's more to share, please share it on the chat or for the WhatsApp group. Sharing my screen again. Thanks everyone for the wonderful sharings. Okay, carrying on. We saw Ramban. Okay, here's a midrash, a really, really interesting one because we've seen a few different sides of the day. Is it about stern judgment? Is it about rejoicing and giving gifts? Is it about this mixture, the Kabbalists say, of compassion and judgment somehow? And this midrash, I feel like this midrash brings it into our psychological experience, into something we can understand in our own experience a little bit. So Exodus Rabbah, Israel says, talking to God, Israel says, Lord of the universe, you have said to us, then we, talking to God, we quote the verse from Jeremiah, House of Israel, like clay in the potter's hand, you are in my hand. So we are talking to God and we quote to God the verse said by the prophet, which came from God, because the prophecy is from God, where God is talking to us, saying, House of Israel, like clay in the potter's hand, you are in my hand. So we say to God, God, you said through your prophet Jeremiah that we are like clay in the potter's hand, and you are the potter and we are the clay. And that you may know this is a theme of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There's a song that we sing where we say, God, we are like a piece of clay in your hand, and then a few other images too like that. Even though we sin and make you angry, do not abandon us, for we are the clay and you are the potter. Same idea again, this time through the prophet Isaiah. So God, you say this over and over again. We're the clay, you're the potter. Now we get into the really interesting bit. Come and see. This potter creates a jug and leaves the stone in it as it is taken out of the oven. It's a bad stone. It's not a good kind of stone. The stone shouldn't be there. If someone puts liquid in the jug, it leaks from where the stone is, and the liquid is lost. Who caused the jug to leak and lose its contents? The potter who left the stone in it. So you go to the potter, we are the clay. If a potter makes a jug that leaks, who do you blame? You blame the person who made it. And in the Midrash, when we say this to God, right, this is all an imagined conversation, the rabbis write, of us saying this to God. God does not have an answer. God does not push back and say, no, it's none, da, 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 da. No, this argument stands. We get to say to God, of course we are fallible and imperfect, and we are like a pot that leaks. We were made that way by you, right? You get to take the credit for this. You have to take the credit for this. So, but actually, before we move on to the next source, even I just want to really think about what that means in terms of the whole idea of a day of judgment and judgment happening at all, right? If we are standing in judgment, and you know the Mishnah, the ancient rabbinic text, said that everybody in the world passes before God one by one, being judged on this day, on Rosh Hashanah. What does it mean to stand in judgment when our fallibility, our imperfection, was built into us by the Creator, who's also judging us, right? Now going to a Hasidic source that brings this even more into our psychology in an even more applied way. This is from the Maggid of Mezrich, great leader of Hasidism after the Baal Shem Tov, the second generation of the Hasidic movement. So he says, all who judge Israel, i.e. anybody, any person, right? Anyone who judges any of us, all who judge Israel are judging the blessed God, as it were, for he is unified with us. So the Hasidic assumption here is that being made in the image of God isn't just an idea that is abstract. We are walking around with a piece of the divine in us. We call it our soul. The Hasidim say that the soul is a piece of the divine. So every being, and certainly every one of us, has this in us. And therefore, if we would dare to be judgmental about ourselves or anyone else, we are actually judging the divine. And this is very typical for Hasidic sources on this subject. They're trying to challenge the overly judgmental, the severely, harshly judgmental approach, which is certainly there especially in the medieval liturgy. If you look at the medieval liturgy and sources, there's a lot of harsh judgment. But the Hasidic movement really came in the 1700s. A lot of its intention was to sweeten that and to make the whole practice of Judaism more psychologically healthy and realistic for human beings, for real human beings who are fallible, and to make it less heavy and crushing and more of something that can actually support us growing. And it's not a coincidence. One of the major causes of the success of the Hasidic movement, and it was a wildfire success that spread to millions of people, which is not obvious, it was not inevitable. One of the main reasons that it was such a success and spread to so many people and really changed the world in doing so, one of the main reasons is it really put a lot of emphasis on friendship, on people being spiritual companions there for each other, being non-judgmental with each other, being supportive with each other, right? That was new. That was, well, at least it was new in that context of the time. See one more Hasidic source from the great Hasidic master Kedushat Levi, Rav Levi Yitzchak Berdichev. This is fantastically radical, this one. Okay, there's a quote here from a psalm that we say before the shofar is blown on Rosh Hashanah. And if you are familiar with the Rosh Hashanah liturgy and that part of the service, it's a very, very intense, serious part of the service when this psalm is recited before the shofar is blown. And the words are, sing, which is Zamru in Hebrew. Zamru, oh, sing to God. Sing, oh, sing to our King. Now, Zamru has a double meaning, which is what he's going to make this teaching about. It means to sing, but it also means to prune, as in to prune a plant, as in to cut bits off that you don't want. And it's very interesting, before we even get into the teaching, if you think about the fact that those words are the same thing in Hebrew, right? To sing is an act of refining through cutting things off. And he's going to say, to explain, talking about this psalm that we say before blowing the shofar, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in order to sweeten the din, the judgment, a person needs to cut down, zamar, the judgments, and serve the Creator with the quality of rachamim, compassion, and not the quality of din that judges his people harshly. Just hold tight to the quality of rachamim, like a father judging his son. So we might go into the day of judgment, and we might be so full of this idea of judgment that we are applying it harshly to ourselves and others, right? Judging ourselves and others harshly. And he's saying what we have to do is exactly the opposite. We have to cut down the judgments and serve with rachamim, with compassion. And then he's going to tie this back to our verse in Psalms. He says, and it is known that Elohim, that's the name of God used in the first line of the Psalm, where it says God here in the first line. You look in the Hebrew, it's Elohim. It is known that Elohim alludes to din. And that's a very ancient rabbinic teaching, goes back to the ancient Midrash commentary on the very beginning of Genesis. In Genesis Rabbah, the rabbis talk about this, that the name Elohim is the name of judgment, of severity. So when it says in the Psalm, sing Zamru, or sing to God, Levi Yitzchak says, yes, cut down the quality of judgment that name of God represents. Cut it down. It's just so incredibly chutzpahdik, cheeky, brazen, and radical, right? He's saying that quality of God is there for us to cut it down, right? It's not, you might like just be shocked by that, right? Hence the psalm says cut down, zamru, cut down, meaning take care to cut down that quality, so that God will not judge his people with din, rather like a father with his son, and he will rescue us from every failing. So you might think before we blow the shofar, gosh, I'm being judged and everyone else is being judged, and just look at everything through that lens. Reb Levi Yitzchak wants us to do exactly the opposite. He wants us to say, gosh, there are forces of judgment. This is an energy of judgment. This is a time of judgment. What is the remedy? What is the thing that we need? What is the medicine for this time? It's that rachamim. By the way, and this rachamim is the same thing talked about here by Ramban Nachmanides, who's a very foundational Kabbalist. So he's drawing on that tradition. He's not making it up. Okay, let's come back together when we'll hear if folks want to ask or share, and then we have a practice to do. Anyone want to ask or share on those last couple of sources? Beryl, is that a hand, please?
Sorry, I didn't know how to raise it.
Okay.
While you were talking, I don't know if this is on point or not, but your description of the divine and the parent, it made me think of that maybe I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied. That if we don't have parents, or if we have parents who cannot or are not, can't bring that to the family or to their children, that the divine in our teaching and the community and the friends that you talked about brings it to us.
That's a very beautiful insight, Beryl. Thank you. That is very, very beautiful. I think what you say is very, very deep. I think kids learn about how to relate to God through their relationships with their parents and other, caring people for them very, very often. And the Baal Shem Tov, who started this movement that we just saw teachings from, the Hasidic movement, he was an orphan, and he really grew up without, as far as we know, he grew up without parental figures at all. He grew up in the care of the community. I'm sure, I hope there were some people who were kind to him, that he survived, but there's no one or two particular people that we know of who really played a primary care role for him. So he really had to learn to do that for himself. And I feel like so many of the teachings of the movement are doing what you say. They're teaching us to parent ourselves in a healthy way and find that healthy relationship. So thank you. That's very, very profound. Yeah. Beautiful. Sarah, please.
Daniel, I was wondering whether the Maggid's statement about all who judge Israel are judging the blessed God, as it were, for he is unified with us, might also have been a response to the anti-Semitism surrounding the community.
Yes. So, okay, when I taught it just now, I deliberately didn't emphasize that aspect of it because I'm teaching it partly through a neo-Hasidic lens, which is kind of looking to universalize a lot of these teachings in that way. But you're absolutely right. In their original context, the divide between the community, and they were, let's be frank, they were a very heavily oppressed, persecuted minority, often in a very violent way. The divide between them and many of their neighbors was a divide that was very mixed over time. You know, sometimes there were very mundane, normal interactions, and sometimes that could last for months or even years, but often there was not that kind of level of civility, and there was often danger and vulnerability and persecution, as I said. So yes, absolutely yes. And by the way, that goes back even to the Zohar, and scholars talk about how the Zohar came from a time when Christianity was espousing the idea that Jews were demonic evil. And so the Zohar acts as a mirror to that idea and turns it on its head and says, actually, we're divine, and anyone who opposes us is demonic evil. So, you know, that's a very real tension that we find in our mystical tradition, and that is you're right, that is part of it. It's about loving ourselves when it's hard to do so. It's hard to love yourself when you're surrounded by people telling you there's something wrong with you, right? So that's very real. And I think also we can see that through a different lens today than we can even just going back a couple of years to before, you know, October 7th, right? That idea and that balance feels different in the world for many of us, I think. So thank you for raising it up, Sarah. Let's hear from Sharon and then Sandy, and then we shall practice. Sharon, please.
Okay, so I think I wrote this in the chat. It's like I'm going through this thing right now where I'm trying to not be so harsh on myself, because I realize I'm very harsh on myself. But now I'm thinking about the Torah, and I keep thinking, well, maybe I should look at myself through God's eyes. How would God look at me? But then I think about the Torah, and the God in many times was very harsh in judgment on the children of Israel. So I don't know if I'm confused, but I'm trying to counteract something right now and just say to myself, I'm trying to figure out what to say to myself, because I think it's also in our tradition that God has been judgmental on us. And okay, I'm blabbing on, but I think maybe for me, I'm just realizing it's one thing to notice your faults and see them, but don't be harsh on yourself when you're seeing them. That's the balance I can see right now, but I'd appreciate your input.
So Sharon, the last thing you said is very, very sound and wise advice, which I definitely support. But the first thing you said is massively important and profound. We need to spend some time with that, because you're right. God in the Torah is this very often angry parent who loses his, and it is a he loses his temper and yells and screams and sends plagues, right? And like there's very real nasty consequences from it. So you're completely right. So thank God we can say the Torah doesn't end with the Torah. The Torah with a capital T, with a writ large, is this evolving tradition. We call it the tree of life. And the prophets, and then the sages, and the rabbis, and the mystics, and the Hasidim, and us here today on this Zoom call, we are all part of that evolution. And a huge part of what the mystical tradition came to do was to say, the God that is that angry father figure of the Torah is not the only face of God. Like the name Shekhinah wasn't invented by the later mystics. It was invented by the rabbis in the Midrash and the Talmud. It's not mentioned in the Torah. Shekhinah is the feminine indwelling, the feminine presence of God in the world, and it's often compared to a maternal, loving and accepting maternal figure. Not only, but that's a very important part of it. Now, the rabbis felt the need to say, we have that experience of God too. that's so when we think about judging ourselves or standing before God, the question is, who are we standing in front of? Like, what kind of God do you believe in? If somebody believes in a God that is angry, you can finish that sentence for yourself, right? You know what comes, right? So the rabbis did something unbelievably brazen. They took something called the 13 attributes of compassion or mercy, which God says, this is my most intense, secret, holy name and list of qualities. And whenever you need to make amends for something you did wrong, say this and it will work and everything will be okay. God says that in the Torah. The rabbis did something unbelievably brazen to it. They chopped it off at the bit where they didn't like it anymore. They kept only the ones which make God sound forgiving, compassionate, and gracious, and slow to anger, and da 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 da. And then when the list starts getting a little bit complicated, when the list starts saying, well, God, like, isn't just going to let everyone off the hook, he is going to punish people also. The rabbi said, we don't actually want that bit in our liturgy. This is serious. This is real. This is in the Talmud, and then we have it to this day. We have in our prayer book, and we say this over and over again in the prayers of the season at this time, the Slichot prayers, but then on Yom Kippur itself, we say over and over again, these 13 qualities, these 13 attributes of compassion or mercy. It's the rabbis editing the Torah to create the God that they want and that they need to believe in. And what I'm saying is, it's up to you. It's up to each of us. If the rabbis can do that, we're part of a tradition that says that's what it means to be in relationship with God. And, personally, the Siddur, the Machzor, the way that they did it works for me to a very large extent. But I also need to know that the tree of life is still growing. And yeah, that's what this Zoom call is. That's what we're doing here today. We're not only here to accept. So thank you.
Thank you. I have my pruning shears ready.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Caduceus Levi would be very proud. Thank you. Sandy, please.
I'm not sure I can formalize this question because it was about a conversation that, let's say, we had maybe 10 minutes ago. I think you had said, Rabbi Daniel, that many people would look at us and say we're demonic, but then you said something looks at everyone else and thinks they're demonic. That number one, is it who when you say, is it the Zohar? Is it what part of our history is looking like that? Because we just did a year on the Baal Shem Tov, and he's like, well, if you see something that you don't like in the other person, you probably don't like it in yourself. So how does this match up?
Great question. So the Baal Shem Tov's talking on the level of psychology and real applied psychology, like our every day-to-day experience. And you're right, he says that if you see something you don't like in someone else, it means that you've got what is it saying? If you've spotted it, you got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Zohar and the circle of Kabbalists at that time, they are talking on the level of theology, and they're saying, and they, again, what they're doing is they're receiving the message from the Christian world, which is saying, like, Jews are like metaphysically evil. Like, I mean, we are like the embodiment of evil in the world. That's what we were told by the surrounding Christian culture at certain times and places, including that time and place where the Zohar emerged. And the Kabbalists of the Zohar, they look at themselves and each other and they say, well, I don't know about you, but like, I'm not evil. Like, I think I'm okay. I think I'm pretty great, right? I'm serving God. I'm like, I believe in love and good things. If you read the Zohar, there's a lot of that in it. So they live in a world where like that binary is the paradigm. And maybe it's hard for them to think beyond it. Maybe that takes a few hundred more years. So they say, well, it must be that the binary is just the wrong way around. If we're the good ones, it's like, it must be, if the whole universe is like, say, a movie like Star Wars where there's like goodies and baddies, and we know we're the goodies, then the other side must be the baddies. And to be frank, the way that they were being persecuted lent a lot of evidence to the possibility that the surrounding culture wasn't very positive. Let's put it that way. Like people were not
Thank you.
acting especially compassionately or kindly.
Reminds me sort of now, and I'm ending it there and going on to the next thing. I just think we're being persecuted now. And it's sad and scary, but this takes us away from what we're studying. So I want to go back to that.
So thank you for just naming something that's real for you and it's part of the context for you. And I think for a lot of us, I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think a lot of our teachings have a different resonance for us now than they did even 2 years ago, which is just very important for us to be aware of. So thank you. It's real. Let's hear from Lynn and then we shall practice. Lynn, please.
Okay, my question, or I guess my comment is, how does all of this, the 13 attributes, all of the goodness, how does that vibe into Einod Milvado and Isaiah, I created good, I created evil? For me, like knowing that it's both is sort of a comfort, not just the good.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So
I had trouble accepting that, oh, God is just good, 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 good.
right. So remember that midrash that talked about how like we're like a piece of a jug which has a leak in it. So I see it like this. That text and these texts in general, they acknowledge there is brokenness in us and there is evil in the world and there is suffering, and some of that suffering is caused by us in acting in unskillful ways. And for the mystics at least, and I think for our rabbis in general, they want and choose and need to believe in an overarching context of a loving, positive creator who, even when stuff is hard, even when challenges arise in life, it's ultimately for good reason. Not that we get to find out what that is or see it in the short term, but that's the universe they want to believe in. And so even the really hard things are part of that, but they don't deny the hard stuff. It's just you want to appreciate it in that way.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome. Important. Okay, we are now going to do a practice. It's actually a practice that was also on the Elul sheet. I'm going to quickly mute everyone, make sure there's no background noise for this part. And we did it. We're doing it in this month of Elul now. It was part of the Elul experience, but it's also really, really important for our Yom Kippur, for Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur preparation. And it's a practice of judging ourselves kindly. So it's a meditative practice where I'm going to ask you to bring to mind something that you regret. And as I always say with this kind of practice, we only have a few minutes to do it. So please pick something very, very small, easy, and manageable. If you want in your own time, you're very welcome to build up gradually, like going to the meditation gym, as I always say, and gradually do things which are more challenging. But that's not something we can jump into. So let's make ourselves comfortable for a few minutes of meditation. Find a posture that you're comfortable sitting in, or if you want, lie. And when you're ready, bring our attention inside ourselves. As we bring our attention within, let's just see if we can be compassionate to whatever we're noticing is going on there. Might be noticing physical sensations, emotions, maybe thoughts. Whatever's going on, see if that inner compassionate parent we talked about can just be welcoming and friendly to whatever's going on there. Let's choose an anchor for our attention for this practice. It's an object that we can bring our attention to that's safe for us. It might be a place in your body that's neutral for you. Maybe the feet or the backside or the elbows. If the body is not good for you, then you can use a visualization, a mantra, the breath, whatever works for you. Let's bring our attention to the object we've chosen. Let's try and keep our attention with it. Experiencing whatever's going on there, moment by moment. And of course, our attention may wander, very likely. That's completely fine. And we bring it back each time we notice it's wandered to the object we've chosen. Noticing what's going on with our anchor. What can we experience just by staying with it? So this anchor is our home base, and we can keep as much of our attention there as we like. And at any point in the practice, and indeed at any point in our lives, we can come back to this beautiful, safe home base for our attention. And I'm going to ask us to think about this small, easy, not huge thing that we've done, said, that we regret, something we wish we hadn't done or said in quite the way we did it. And let ourselves relive the moment, bring ourselves back there. Because as many of our senses as is possible, really let ourselves feel what our experience of that time was. Holding ourselves with compassion and care. Now we're going to inquire, what was the positive motivation behind what we did? We know that we acted unskillfully in some way. We know we regret it in some way. We wish we hadn't. But we're not entirely evil, God forbid, none of us. We're not entirely ignorant also. There was some desire to do something good here that was misdirected. There was a spark of goodness. There was a positive intention. There was a need that was trying to be met. What was going on under the surface? If we bring compassion to help our inquiry, help us feel with compassion into ourselves, what were we trying to do? See if we can find that positive spark, that positive intention, and really focus on it, give it attention, and give it gratitude. Thank you that this positive intention is within me. Even if I can't find exactly where it is or what it is, I know it's there. I didn't try and hurt someone or do something mean just to do something mean. There was something positive behind what I was doing also. Take a minute to appreciate the place of goodness in us that wants to do right and do good. It doesn't always get expressed perfectly, us being human and fallible. But this positive intention, this spark of goodness, our mystics say this is teshuvah. This is our ability to return. This is the whole idea of return. Our teachers tell us this has existed before the universe, before creation. This drive to improve and grow, to return to something higher. Let's gradually bring this round of practice to a close. Now let's come back together slowly, taking your time. And let yourself breathe, sigh, yawn, move your body in whatever way you want to. Thanks everyone for your practice. So I would love to pause again here and hear things that came up for people during the practice, but looking at the time, I fear we should carry on because there's another unit to do. What I will say is those of us already on the WhatsApp group, it's very, very welcome and encouraged for people to share things that came up during the session for you. And I would love it. And I think we'd all benefit a lot from it. And remember, what is very obvious to each of us, because it's our own experience, is very often very illuminating for everyone else, because we all have such different experiences. So please don't hold back with sharing things that others may benefit from. So I'm going to share my screen again and we'll carry on to the next section. So we saw about the judgment, judging kindly, and that balance of judgment. And now we're going to look at a very, very important theme of Rosh Hashanah in this section, creation. And specifically creating ourselves, which is a major, major theme of the day and of our work at this time. So it begins with this very beautiful classic argument in the Talmud, of course, an argument about creation, about the creation of the world. And I'll read it here from the Talmud. The section of the Talmud is called Rosh Hashanah. It's all about Rosh Hashanah and related things. It is taught that Rabbi Eliezer says, in Tishrei, the world was created. In Tishrei, the patriarchs were born. In Tishrei, the patriarchs died. On Passover, Isaac was born. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered by God and conceived. On Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out from prison. On Rosh Hashanah, our forefathers' slavery in Egypt ceased. In Nisan, the Jewish people were redeemed. And in Tishrei, in the future, the Jewish people will be redeemed. I know that's a long shopping list of things, so I'll summarize it. Rabbi Eliezer says, all these very important things happened in Tishrei, which is, of course, the month we're going into, the month of Rosh Hashanah, except that he concedes on Passover, which is in Nisan. Remember I said before that our month of Tishrei and Nisan are opposite each other. They are the 2 months related to the equinox, the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. So they are very much opposite on the circle of the year. So on Passover, Isaac was born. But on everything else, all these other important things happened on Rosh Hashanah. Except, of course, in Nisan, the Jewish people were redeemed. He also concedes that. That's also Passover. You can't really argue with that. But Rabbi Yoshua is going to push back and say a lot of these things the opposite. So let's see. Rabbi Yoshua says, pushing back, in Nisan, the world was created. Wait a minute. We just had Rabbi Eliezer said the world was created in Tishrei, and that's Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yoshua says the world was created in Nisan. And he says, likewise, in Nisan, the patriarchs were born. In Nisan, the patriarchs died. on Passover, Isaac was born. That's not controversial. But on Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered by God and conceived. That's Rabbi Yeshua conceding to Rosh Hashanah. And on Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out from prison. He also concedes that. On Rosh Hashanah, our forefathers' slavery in Egypt ceased. That's interesting. The idea is not that we left Egypt then, but that we stopped actually being slaved. So he concedes that as well. In Nisan, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt, and in Nisan, in the future, the Jewish people will be redeemed. So the major argument, what we really need to hold on to here, is about creation of the world. But it is interesting. That also relates to when the world will be redeemed in the future, according to this argument. Rabbi Eliezer says the world was created and the world will be redeemed in the month of Tishrei. And Rabbi Yeshua says those two things, creation and redemption, happen in Nisan, the month of Pesach. Now, how does one reconcile these different opinions, which the Talmud generally, is a project in trying to do to some extent, at least enough that we can have a consistent practice? Well, we have a commentary on the Talmud called the Tosafot, the Tosafis, related to the great commentator Rashi. They are relatives of his, descendants of his, who try and solve this for us. And they say, regarding the above dispute, Rabbeinu Tam, that's one of the Tosafis, one of these medieval rabbis commenting on the Talmud, he said, these and those are the words of the living God. That's a quote from the Talmud itself, but he's applying it to this argument that's new. That quote was previously related to something else. These and those are words of the living God means they're both right. It means, yes, Rabbi Eliezer is right, the world is created in Tishrei, and Rabbi Yeshua is right, the world is created in Nisan. Well, you might be wondering, that's very Jewish. How can they both be right? And now he's going to explain why. He says, one could say that in Tishrei, the thought arose to create, but the universe was not created until Nisan. So let's see one more way that this same idea is articulated, this time by a mystic, by the great Hasidic rabbi, the Bnei Yisachar of Sri Elimelech of Dinov, and he's quoting actually, or he's paraphrasing the Arizal, the great Kabbalist of the 1500s in the north of Israel, in Sfat, Rabbi Isaac Luria. The Bnei Yisachar says, Rabbi Eliezer holds that the universe was created in Tishrei, and Rabbi Yeshua holds in Nisan. Okay, we saw that. Now he's going to say why. And they're both true, according to our master, the Arizal, this one in action and this one in thought. So same idea that we just saw in the Tosafos, just maybe a little bit clearer. Here, and now I'm going to say it in super plain English. God thinks about creating the universe. You might say conceives, because we use the word conceive in that sense as well, right? God conceives of the universe in Tishrei, and then the actual creation happens 6 months later in Nisan, right? There's just like you might compare it to any other thing, including a human being, which is conceived, and then there's a birth, right? There's a conception, and then there's a birth. Nisan is the month of spring, when animals give birth to their new baby animals, and you can see the blossoming on the plant life, the trees and the plants are all very obviously visibly blossoming. That is when creation actually happens. That's when it hits the surface. When Tishrei is when it's just conceived, it just happens under the surface. You don't see the fruits of it yet, but it's going to manifest 6 months later. That's the claim. Let's see a little bit more from our Hasidic masters on this, from the Shem Shmuel, Rav Shmuel Bornstein from Poland. He says, the 7th month, Tishrei, is the most suitable time for creativity. For that is when a person's fruits emerge. For a person is a tree of the field. Just like in material matters, that is when the fruit of the tree finish ripening. So this verse from the Torah, from Deuteronomy, says a person is a tree of the field. The rabbis it actually was originally a rhetorical question in the Torah, but the rabbis have turned it into a statement and said, yes, of course, we know a person is a tree of the field. And he's saying, if we think about the agricultural cycle, it's everything I'm saying about agricultural cycles and the seasons, of course, it's based on a calendar that's based here in the land of Israel. But if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's going to be recognizably similar. Right? It's tricky for folks in the Southern Hemisphere. That's gonna be a bit different. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's pretty similar. The fruits And everything that we celebrate the harvest of in Tishrei and Sukkot, as somebody mentioned before, Sukkot's the harvest festival, we celebrate the harvest. Everything has already reached fruition, he's saying, and we're celebrating that harvest, and the fruits have come out. And therefore, he's saying, given that we are like the trees, it's a time for creativity, because the fruit of the tree has finished ripening, and the finished fruits are being presented to the world. I believe what he's saying is your Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, especially, talking about the beginning of the month, but all of Tishrei is not only the beginning of a new year, it's also the harvest of your old year, of the year we're finishing. It's so the experience we have in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in this time of year is, in a certain sense, the fruit of everything, all the work we've done in the year leading up to it, which really makes sense with why there's such a big emphasis in our tradition on, oh my God, Rosh Hashanah is coming. Now it's only a week away, a week and a couple of days for us right now. And we need to do the work. We need to get ready. Right? Like, what is this last minute rush? And according to what we're seeing here, the work we need to do is deep creativity. And we're going to see sources that say it's about making ourselves. The work, we are the product, we are the tree, we are the fruit. We are what we are working on in this time of year. When the whole world, the rabbis were arguing in the Talmud here about the whole world being created, what we're concerned with is our little piece of the universe that we call ourselves. Our universe is being made. We have the ability to influence it at this point. It appears that's the Rebbe, the great Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. He says here in H. Kodesh, his drashot, his sermons on the Torah, he says, the time for teshuvah, for returning, is Rosh Hashanah, the time of the creation of the world, because teshuvah is also creation. So he ties this together for us very beautifully and strongly and directly, right? Because you might be wondering, Day of Judgment, teshuvah, what's that got to do with creating the world? He says teshuvah is creation. What does it mean to return to my higher self, to return to my source? It means to choose who I want to be and do my best to get there, right? It means to write myself, to create myself, to draw myself, to sculpt myself, whatever your creative metaphor is, to dance myself, to sing myself, whatever the creative act is, it's an act of creation. Rabbi Jill Hammer, I mentioned before, because a very special Sefer Yetzirah, very special teacher. So she writes very beautifully in her Jewish Book of Days, which I highly recommend. She writes very beautifully, but I'm going to read what she writes. Born from a seed, the tree bears seed. Just that needs to be said again. Born from a seed, the tree bears seed. It's just so powerful, right? A tiny seed goes into a huge tree, and then eventually, after the whole cycle finishes, the tree bears seed. The tree creates fruit and seed again, which starts that cycle again. The land spends itself to create what will thrive next spring. We use the growth of past seasons to sustain a new one. Rich with the fruits of the year, we prepare to be winnowed down to a single seed, the new beginning of our lives. I have to read it all again. Born from a seed, this tree bears seed. The land spends itself to create what will thrive next spring. We use the growth of past seasons to sustain a new one. Rich with the fruits of the year, we prepare to be winnowed down to a single seed, the new beginning of our lives. So she takes the idea of the fruit and where we are in the cycle of growth, and she asks a different question. She says, after the tree has made the fruit, and all that's left is a tiny seed, because the fruit, either somebody eats the fruit or it rots. Either way, all you're left with is a seed, and the seed is going to be the beginning of next year's fruit. And so the question is, what is the seed that I am being winnowed down to now? Meaning you might put it another way. What have I learned from the past year? How have I grown from the past year? What is the thing that I'm carrying with me from the past year that I'm going to build on, that I'm going to use to make something new that I've never made before in this coming year? Going back to the ancient rabbis in the Jerusalem Talmud, God said to us, because you came before me in din, in judgment on Rosh Hashanah, and survived, I consider you as if you have been made into new creations. And God says to us, this is an ancient rabbinic text. God says to us, because you came before me in judgment on Rosh Hashanah and survived, I consider you as if you have been made into new creations. So there's something about, to tie these themes together of judgment and creation, something about the act of self-reflection, self-accounting, accountability, transparency, standing in judgment, whatever that means. Something about that process of standing in judgment helps us to begin all over again as if we are new creations. The Hebrew is very strong. I'm going to highlight it and say it. Bria Chadasha, a new creation, literally. That's really what it's saying, that each one of us is a new creation. And to go back to the rabbis arguing in the Talmud, when was the universe created? Was it created then or not? It's not just an abstract academic debate for them. They're saying, when do we really get to start all over again with ourselves? And the answer, by the way, is always. The mystics say in every moment the universe is recreated. But I would compare it to waves in water, and that there are little waves and big waves. And this is a very big wave of renewal, of hitchadshut, as the rabbis say. This is a very big opportunity to catch a whole new opening to create who we want to be. Another teaching from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who we saw before, he says here about this idea. He says, the word for blowing the shofar also means striking or inserting. And then he quotes a verse from the Torah which proves this. He struck the socket of his hip. It's a verse talking about the fight between Jacob and the angel. This means, he says, that this, so I should also say the Hebrew word he's talking about is this word here. I'll highlight it in the Hebrew, tak'u and tak'ah. So the Hebrew he's talking about here is kaf, kuf, ayin, tak'ah. So he's saying that's the word we use for blowing the shofar, but it also has this other meaning of striking or inserting. He says this means that this form of service that we call the shofar, blowing the shofar, should be embedded always in your hearts. It should be struck and inserted into our hearts and always be new for you, as if you have never began to serve God at all. That's him inserting his own Hasidic idea there. That is a key idea in all of Hasidism, which is the heart. The heart is not just the heart; it's also the consciousness. But our consciousness is always new, and being attuned to reality means being attuned to the fact that we are coming into being in every moment. And in fact, the universe is coming to being in every moment. So he says, the shofar, this great wake-up call, is a wake-up to the fact that this moment should be new for us, and as if we have never begun to serve God at all. And this service of the shofar is there to remind us of that. And he says, this is the meaning of sing a new song to Hashem, that you will sing a new song constantly. So the psalm says, sing a new song to Hashem. It's in the Friday night liturgy, Kabbalah Shabbat. Sing a new song, he says, is not just an invitation to do something once or sometimes, occasionally. It's a practice instruction that we are being asked to come back to constantly, to live in a way, and this is a real question for all of us to approach in our own way. What does it mean to live in a way that renewal is built into our lives as a constant practice? Because by definition, anything we try and build into our lives can get old, right? It will become routine, get stale. He's saying to be a seeker, to be alive, to be really alive, we need to have this quality of constant renewal. Somehow find a way to build that in. And that's all these sources on creating ourselves, on creation being teshuvah. The universe is being created. Can we create ourselves? That's what they're asking us to do. So now we have another practice to do on this. Actually, before we practice, we have time to discuss, share. If anyone has any questions or insights on these sources, on these ideas, we have time for that. We'd love to hear. Please raise a Zoom hand, or try raising a real hand if I can see you. Tova, please.
Well, what came up for me is kind of Rachmanis. Sort of, it kind of went back to what we were studying in the last section, which is, if it took God if it takes God in creation to have a thought on Tishrei and then actually effectuate it in Nisan, it's a long process. And so in terms of, instead of thinking about, Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that, blah, snap, it's going to happen. I need to think of it as in that way with Rachmanis, that I can have the thought on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but it's not going to instantly happen. It needs to grow, it needs to be watered, it needs to be grown, or grown, and watered and nurtured. And you have to have Rachmanis to allow yourself the room to do that. That's what kind of came up for me. The other thing that came up was God having a thought, which I thought was a strange idea, but that's sort of less than the importance of having Rachmanis, and take Rosh Hashanah as making a resolution, but then let it grow into Pesach. That's what came up for me.
That's beautiful, Torah. And I love that you use the word rachmanis, and I'll translate it. It's another word for rachamin, basically, for compassion. And of course, it's related, like rachamim, to the word for womb. And that's what we're talking about here, right? What you so beautifully articulated is there's a womb. And what you just said so beautifully, Tova, is even our own process of teshuvah, of returning, of going, is a kind of womb. Like, I'm trying to do better. The better me is not going to be born instantly, but hopefully, if I work at it, it will be born eventually. But thank you. That's beautiful. That's great bringing together of these ideas. Andy, please.
Thank you. Building on what Tova said, the eventuality of it, I'm experiencing a complete foreground background switch. Instead of focusing on all the things I've done wrong, I should be focusing on what I've learned. And I'm really struck by your use of the word unskillful, that these things we've done have been unskillful, not bad, not evil, but unskillful. And I'm learning a skill, and this is what I've learned, and this is the skill I will keep developing and keep moving. So switching from beating myself up to, yeah, this is where I am now, and this is where I'm going. And it's all a process. And the voice in my head that goes, well, you're so old, you should have known this by now. You should, what's taking you so damn long? Pardon me. But yeah, but no, I'm still growing, and I'm becoming more skillful over time. And that's where my focus should be, not on beating myself up for my unskilled behavior.
Amen. Right. Amen. And I don't want to say that, I want to give credit where it's due. I learned the language of skillful from the Buddhist meditation world. But isn't that what the rabbis are trying to say when they say we are like a jug that's been made in this way that it has a leak? And it's really hard. Like, of course we're going to leak. We were made that way. Isn't that, to me, that's just like the same teaching in a different language. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Hina, please.
Thank you. Did you use the word hitrashut earlier as a word for renewal?
Oh, sorry, I said hitchadshut.
Hitchadshut. Thank you.
You're so welcome. The root there is chet daled shin, which is also the same word for month, not coincidentally, because a month is a circle of renewal. Chodesh. Thank you. Talian, please.
I really
There was one more quick question that I had. I'm sorry. It was about it's gone.
Okay, so we'll come back to you after if you remember. It's fine. No
Thank you
problem.
so much.
Okay. I really, it's hearing this is the fact that this progress, this the potentiality of that, the Rosh Hashanah as the new life, new birth, but then it's almost like Nisan. It's like the rebirth, the process of the rebirth, which gives us the time where I always felt like, oh, Rosh Hashanah, I have to Yom Kippur, in 10 days I have to do this, which is so unnatural and really unnatural, where it's really showing, and then it's hard, then you're beating yourself up, oh, I haven't, done the work in the 10 days. But this is really it's just like you're setting like a plant itself. You're really the seed at this moment. It's the birth of the seed of yourself for you to actualizing the rebirth of the totality of yourself at Nisan.
So beautifully put, Dalian. Thank you. And I want to say, if anybody, you or anyone else, wants to really kind of like go through the year with that consciousness, that Jewish Book of Days by Rabbi Jill Hammer is a great companion for doing that, because that's basically what she does. She like takes us through the seasons and shows like how we are going through that journey in harmony with what's going on in nature around us. It's really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jill or Harry or both of you?
Hi, I'm being a bit more literal, I think. The 6 months between Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, firstly it's 6, and I think that's quite interesting because the 6 days of creation, 6 months. There's also something about the birth of Moses, which seems to be after 6 months, if you look at when they're remarried and all of that, and then he's hidden for 3 months. And there's something about that sort of idea of birth of something special that can then be hidden, that maybe is part of it. I'm just throwing that out because it just popped into my head. Sorry.
I think you are correct. With Moses, it's really complicated because they, as you mentioned, they hide him and so on. So I'm not 100% sure that he was born after a 6-month pregnancy, or if they I'm getting mixed up myself when I think about the details, but you might well be right. But you know who was born? Oh, sorry, go on.
I felt it was because they expected him to be born 3 months later, and he was already born and got hidden for the 3 months.
Okay, I think you're right. Does not so in a bit, but I think that does sound like what I've heard, and I think you're totally right. But there's another one as well, which is Isaac. This one I happen to remember. Isaac, the tradition says, was born after a 6-month pregnancy. And what I've heard about that is that the rabbis say 6 months is, according to the rabbis, the minimum possible time that can lead to a baby who actually survives. And so Isaac represents this miraculous birth after this minimum time. And then if you remember back in the rabbinic debate about when the world was created, they're very concerned with when Isaac is born. And remember also, we're told Isaac is Rosh Hashanah. So there's something surprisingly miraculous about him, which I think I think what you're saying about Moses is also a similar thing there. So yeah,
it's about conception and birth. I was trying to,
yeah. And it's, as you said, something very good and very important. Of course, Moses leads to the redemption, which is the main event of Nisan, and Isaac is Rosh Hashanah. So the two really match up. Oh, thank you. Beautiful. Well, Sharon, please.
I just wanted to add something to the discussion about things to have teshuvah about. And this gave me a whole different slant on it. I was just reading Rabbi Alnu's book, One God Clapping. At the end of the book, he talks about on Rosh Hashanah, when we're looking in the prayer book and we get distracted and our mind wanders, that he said, that's it. You can use that as a tool. It's your subconscious material that's coming up. And that's a good, I'm not saying this very well. That's something to reflect upon. And this takes me completely out of the conversation about judgment when I think of it in that way. And all these spiritual practices we do, like on Rosh Hashanah prayer and everything, is kind of like a catalyst for things to bubble up and look at them as, like, in a way, I'm just starting to think of it as sort of a gratefulness that these things are bubbling up so we can look at them, because when we start looking at them, because they were hidden before, when we start looking at them, that's the beginning of the process of them disappearing is the wrong word, but being eaten and chewed up and maybe like lessening. I
Completely.
hope
I
this
mean,
adds something to the conversation.
no, I think it's very well taken. All all of the rituals and prayers and all the practices we're doing, everything we're talking about is hopefully to create a situation where there's a healing that happens. A synagogue, my teacher, Rabbi Weiss, always says, a synagogue is supposed to be a hospital for the soul and for our innermost being. So that's what's supposed to be happening. And I love that book so much, Rav Alan's book, and I'm grateful to you because I forgot that part of it. I think my hearing you say that bit now, what comes up for me is he's saying when we marinate our consciousness, as Reb Zalman used to say, when we marinate our mind, marinate our being in these practices, then even our distracting thoughts are actually helpful teachers. Right? That's what it's, right. Even like that thing that seems to be a distraction is actually telling me something very helpful that I need to address, and it's helpful to bring energy to. So yeah, I think that's part of the beauty of having this very intense time of year where this theme is surrounding us and we're so immersed and engrossed in it in this way. We're really, the Hebrew verb that comes to mind is mitasek. We are engaging ourselves in it. We're, and that's one of the beautiful fruits of it. So thank you. Let's hear from Chana Bracha and then we shall practice. Chana Bracha, please.
Wow. Thank everybody for the shares. From my perspective, it's all about unification with the essence of the source, and obviating the need to pull in with shame. Me, I'm so bad. This is terrible. I did it. That narrows yourself and separates. And this is our opportunity, rather, when we're talking about, rather than beating up on ourselves, to open up to the God in us, to the divine in us, to the light in us, and let it shine through rather than contract. So thank you. Wow. I'm so excited for the holidays.
Oh man, beautiful. Chana Bracha, I feel like that what you just said could be like a manifesto for what the Hasidic movement was trying to do, what it was trying to add to what was there before it came along. Because that piece was always present in our tradition. It was there previously, but it had really been gradually worn down in the time and place when Hasidism emerged. So thank you for articulating that so beautifully. Let us practice, friends. It's another meditative practice. This one relating to the teachings we just saw. It's a practice on experiencing the constant renewal of existence. So it's that idea we saw that we're constantly being created and actually co-creating ourselves, depending on what we pay attention to and how we do that. So please make yourselves comfortable for a few minutes of practice. Finding a posture that works for you. I'll lead us into it. Bring our attention inside ourselves. Again, seeing if we can be welcoming and compassionate to whatever we're noticing within, much as possible. Physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, whatever it is. It's all welcome. It's all okay. We are just that piece of pottery that was made in this beautifully, perfectly imperfect way that we are. Again, finding an anchor. You might want to use the same one you used before. An object we can bring our attention to and try and keep it with that safe place in the body or whatever you used. What's happening there? That anchor, moment by moment. Bringing our attention back to it when we need to. Depending on how easy or finding it is to keep focused on your anchor, you might want to do this practice remaining entirely with your anchor, entirely with the object you've chosen. If you feel very focused and you feel you can also expand your focus, expand your attention to include more of yourself, if you like. Parts of your body, or maybe all of your body, whatever feels like it's really realistic for you to focus on it in a meditative way. And not just get lost in thought, as we all do sometimes. Focusing on the anchor, or if you like, more of yourself. And we're going to introduce this idea, this possibility that we and everything we're experiencing within ourselves and everything that exists outside ourselves, everything is being created in every moment. Our job is to hold ourselves with compassion. Try and stay in a meditative, grounded state, noticing what's going on moment by moment. As we explore this possibility, this question. Asking over and over again, is it possible? This thing I'm experiencing, whatever it is, this particular thing or all of it, this is being created anew in each moment, again and again. Noticing with compassion whatever happens. Letting go of any judgment. There's no right or wrong experience. There's no getting it right in meditation. Just letting ourselves experience whatever happens when we ask this question, open to this possibility. Is there renewal happening on some level? we need to begin again, we just come back to the anchor. Notice what's going on there. When we're ready, introduce the question. Is renewal present? Is creation happening? Is it possible? Let's bring this round of practice to a close. Slowly, gradually. Let's come back together, slowly and gradually. And again, let ourselves breathe and yawn and sigh and move however we want to. And yeah, let's make time. If a couple of people want to share things, that'd be great. Sarah, please.
That was lovely, Daniel. It brought together lots of threads that have been in the chat and on the screen. I realized as if I can see myself as being born anew in every moment, certainly in every day, then I can treat myself with the gentleness that I would treat a newborn child. And I can have what Andrea suggested about sculpting, that I can help myself build those new skills. I can teach myself to walk, talk, but remembering always the divine in me that is there to help me learn all of those new skills, to see with the new eyes, to hear with the ears, to take those steps toward my path of renewal. Thanks.
Thank you. That's so beautifully put, Sarah. Thank you. Kathy, please.
Thank you, Rabbi Daniel. I was just thinking that this desire for transformation, for renewal, that is something we all strive for. I don't know if that's the right word. But I think that this very specific work that is called for at this time of year can't be let go of or minimized. That with gentleness and kindness to ourselves, we can be very specific about certain things that we want to change. And that if, we truly want to change, I truly want to change, and I think it's possible, then that experience of transformation can really happen, not just in some idea, but in reality. Thank you.
Amen. Can you hear us? So maybe so. And just to balance out, we've talked so much in this class about compassion and so forth. Kathy, what you're holding up is very, very important. That compassion is like the container and the context for change, for healthy change. So thank you for holding that up. Laura, please.
So I was thinking about that there's like a subtractive element to this process, which is the winnowing and the pruning. And then there's the additive component, which is the creating. And, I feel like you have to, these kind of are synchronized in a way. I'm not saying that every single time that you create, that something has to disappear. But I do think that there's something to that at the same time when I think about my own process.
Yeah.
So it's something disappears. I mean, you don't have to disappear it, but something gets replaced in the process of renewing and creating. And you could, in my practice, I kind of experimented with that. What does that feel like in the body, right? So when there's an absenting of something, we want it to be absented, right? And so then there's a relief, there's a release, and there's a relief. And I think I think there's a way, if we're not certain about things, right, to experiment in practice with the sensations and so forth and the feelings to see what's borne out, right? No pun intended. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, very well taken. I think you're right. I think of it in terms of a letting go. All right, that's part of this process. And there's a thin line because we don't want to be like suppressing something or hiding something from ourselves in an unhealthy way. But there's a point in the process where there's definitely a letting go of certain things, and hopefully integrating that which does serve us. Thank you, Laura. Lynn, please. I think you get the last word, and then I want to wrap up.
I
Please.
just have a simple question. In the first practice that we did, we talked about this question of what's the urge behind the unskillful thing you did. There was something good. When in the last meditation, when you all the time we say it, no judgment, no judgment. What's a question you could ask yourself to help you do that? Because I know I have a lot of judgments towards myself and other people in all these situations. They just appear. What is a question you could say when that comes up to try and dissipate it a little bit?
So something that comes to mind is actually related to what Sarah said. Is that it's not actually a question, but it's an intention, and a practice we can do is we can hold ourselves with the care that we would hold a young child or even a baby potentially in a kind of self-parenting way. Because what sometimes what's happening when we're being harsh on ourselves is this kind of like harsh inner parental voice is talking. And if we can learn to strengthen, it's like a muscle we can strengthen of a kinder parental voice, that can eventually become strong enough and fluid enough that it can step into that role more of the time, so instead of the harsher one. So it's a practice of yeah, holding ourselves with that care and remembering that we really are imperfect and born that way, and no one has all the answers, and that our judgment is based on a false assumption of that we're supposed to get it right, we're supposed to know it, and it's just not true. So just it's just about having there's a certain piece of compassion there for the human experience, the human condition being really hard.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to very quickly, I see we're over time. I want to very quickly draw everyone's attention to something we didn't see today. I knew we wouldn't see today, but it's just very, very, very important and helpful, which is the very next thing on the sheet after everything we covered is a practice from the Baal Shem Tov, where it's a teaching and a practice, where he says something very, very important. And I just want to spread it out here for 1 second and then we'll finish, which is he says, remember those books the Talmud talked about, the book of life, the book of death, the book of in between, the 3 books. And right, he says the writing in the books is our own thoughts. That's what he says in that little snippet. So it's very, 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 very important for us that this is a key practice for us. The way we think in ourselves is to a very large extent what is going to write that script for the coming year.
Wow.
With that, I want to bless everyone very, very much and give you a lot of gratitude for being here, for practicing, for holding each other, for holding me, and say Shana Tova. And you will be hearing from me very soon with another video about Yom Kippur, which will be recorded, and then we'll talk about it on the WhatsApp group and by email. And then there'll be one about Sukkot too, a little later. For now, Shana Tova and lots of love, and really wonderful to be together. Thank you everyone very, very much.
Thank you.
Shana
Thanks a lot.
Tova.
Thank you,
Shana
Shana
Tova.
Tova.
Thank you. Thank you, Shana Tova.
Have a safe one and a healthy one.
Amen,
Shana
amen.
Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Thank
Shana
you,
Tova.
Shana Tova.